Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody to the September 23rd, 2020 Pelham Board of Education meeting. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. This brings us to 2.4, the reiteration of executive session motions. Sue.
The board met in executive session to discuss the employment history of a particular individual.
Thank you. Welcome to the Pelham Board of Education meeting of Wednesday, September 23rd. Tonight we will discuss and approve the board and district goals, which we began discussing at our last meeting. Additionally, we will approve our district and board committees. Once these committees are finalized, we will send a communication to the public about our application process for our committee work. This is a great chance for members of the community to become involved in the work we do as a district. The deadline to submit your applications will be October 8th. So our students have completed, I counted, 10 days of instruction since we met last. My students at home have proven to be far more resilient than the adults in our house, mastering the various schedules, maneuvering through school and town with their clear dividers, and adjusting to the synchronous and asynchronous elementary learning. Most importantly, they're excited about being in school and they value their time in the classroom and with their teachers. As expected, the start of this year is more challenging than most, and the challenges will likely continue throughout the year. Students and teachers are being asked to operate and exist in our school buildings in a way they have never before. The hybrid model commands teachers to do their jobs differently than they've had to before, and to be ready to adjust and continually depending on many circumstances that may be largely out of everyone's control. With less than 2 weeks under our belts, our teachers are still adjusting to this new model, one that they could not fully train for until their students were in the classroom. They are also working to get to know their students and to begin critical assessments so they have a clear view of the playing field this year. While we have heard frustrations from some parents that our plan is not yet working, I ask for their patience. While I know all of our patience has been tested a great deal over the past 6 months, and we've all been eagerly awaiting the return to school of our children, teaching effectively in this model does not happen overnight. Our year's success hinges on flexibility, an open mind, ongoing feedback, and a humble willingness to adapt and adjust as needed. This goes for all of us, teachers, parents, and students. While I know this will be a challenge, I am confident that we're up for the test. The board and the administration are committed to hearing the feedback of our teachers, parents, and students and adjusting our plans as needed wherever possible. In closing, I'd like to remind members of the public who wish to submit public comment for this meeting to email me directly by 9 p.m. this evening at jddomenico@pelhamschools.org, to include your name and your Pelham mailing address, and to please keep your comments brief as I will be reading them into the public record. Thank you. So this brings us to section 3, which is the approval of the minutes. I'd like to take a consent of items 3.1 and 3.2. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Benny and Jess. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 4 is administrative and committee reports. 4.1 is Dr. Champ's superintendent's report.
Thank you, Jessica. So we are closing in, as you said, on completing our second week of the hybrid model. We're incredibly thankful to have gotten to this point where all students have had at least some opportunity to come into school each week, to forge face-to-face relationships with their teachers and peers, and to start to bring some semblance of normalcy back. We don't have to look too far to see some districts who have already had to postpone even getting to this point, or who have started and have had to shift back to virtual instruction already due to quarantines or other issues. While this is not quite the school year that any of us truly wanted it to be, it is far more than we had in the spring, and we continue to be thankful for each day that we successfully complete with students and staff in our schools healthy and getting back to the business of learning. Overall, from the inside, I know folks, most parents are not able to come into the schools the way they were before, but if you could, what you would see is a lot of smiles, a lot of happy kids, and a lot of happy teachers. Our kids are doing incredibly well. They're so diligent and so conscientious of all the new protocols and practices. Masks are not an issue, barriers are not an issue, bathroom protocols, hallway directions, all of that. They're great troopers, and they want nothing more to be successful, to do the right thing, and to be at school. So it's very evident in all they do. The in-person instruction part of the hybrid model has run very smoothly, and we've been very pleased with it. In addition to the masks and the barriers and all those protocols, health screenings have been moving very well, have been going very smoothly as well. We did start the year with paper, obviously. Sometimes old school is simplest and easiest and gets the job done very well. So that's been going incredibly well, especially at the elementary. At the secondary, we've now introduced Easy Screen as a new app that families can use as an option. Certainly, I would say, and Julia may speak to this in her report as well, but we reviewed a number of apps that were designed specifically for schools. None of them are great. We picked what we felt was the best of the ones that we looked at and are working through the bugs of implementation. But we're hoping that does make it a little bit easier for some families. So families will continue to have the choice of whether to use Easy Screen on the app or on paper, whether you just find paper easier or whether your secondary age child doesn't have a smartphone. That's fine, it's not a problem. We leave that up to parent choice. But we continue to appreciate people being diligent about doing that each day and being genuine and honest and taking care and really trying to adhere to those questionnaires very specifically. So we appreciate their efforts there. Our buildings are continue to be cleaned and sanitized daily. We're thankful for our custodians and for their diligent and hard work. We are trying to get the buildings cleared out as early as possible. By 4:30 is really our guideline to enable them sufficient time to clean within their workday. I would like to mention we did have a couple internet blips this week, and I know that prior to opening of school, we'd mentioned with the board some concerns around internet capacity, not at our level, but potential problems that could come from the Lyric, who is the provider of our bandwidth. And actually, the problems we have did not relate to that. So I think that's one good piece of news. We have not even come close to maxing out our internal district bandwidth capacity. I think we have 800 MPs, whatever that stands for. I think John said we came up to maybe, I think we said 500 or 600 at one point, but that's it. So we have not even come close to topping off on our internet internal bandwidth. We did have a couple problems this week. Siwanoy, I think, was down for 4 minutes due to a Lyric problem. It was not the bandwidth capacity, it had to do with some cabling that was rectified very quickly. And then we did have a couple outages at Hutchinson, which had to do with the backup battery of the system, because it's an aging building, aging system, aging battery. But we believe that that's been resolved at this point in time, so hopefully we'll not have that outage happening again. But other than that, we've been really thankful that the internet has held up. So that was great news for us. And I think it's really important especially our big test internally is when we had all the high school students finally coming in. That was our biggest internal capacity. And then I think getting through this week and going into next week will be the regional test, as most schools who are starting to phase in it seems like September 21st was a big key date for a lot of schools. So I think in the next week, this week and leading into next week, we should see the region basically getting fully online. So hopefully that will continue to go well. And then I would say, as anticipated, the remote learning portion of our plan certainly was going to be the bigger challenge, especially at the younger grades. We think at the upper grades, I think it's been very, very successful. Students and staff are all adapting well. As everyone gets a little more experience with the technology and classroom routines that are needed in a hybrid environment, we do anticipate that things will continue to get smoother for everyone at all grades and all age levels. And Jessica alluded to this as well, as with anything new, we do need to give it some time to see how it works once it's fully operating as it was intended before we can truly assess how it is going. That being said, we do plan to survey staff and parents after we've been up and running for a few weeks to determine what changes and adjustments may need to be made to make it more manageable and effective. So we do, as Jessica said, appreciate your continued patience. I think, as I said before, we're miles ahead of where we were in the spring. So we're really thankful for that and continuing to learn and grow and learn new lessons each day. So I wanted to just mention some cohort reminders. We were joking early in one of our conversations that there's so many letters to keep track of right now. It used to be, especially in the middle school, you had a team that you were on, and then there was 6 cycle days. Now there's cohorts and teams and cycle days. I don't know why we all drive ourselves crazy with that, but we recognize it's hard to keep track of all of that. So as a reminder, Cohort B will be in person this Thursday and Friday. Cohort A will continue to learn remotely. Next week, as I think everyone knows, schools are closed on Monday in observance of Yom Kippur. Because, therefore, it's a shortened week, next week on Wednesday will be a regular full day of instruction under the hybrid model, so no early release. That's how our model works. If it's a full 5 days, then we do the early release on Wednesday like we did today. Next week is a shortened week, therefore no early release. So for next week, Cohort A will be here on Tuesday, Wednesday, Cohort B on Thursday, Friday. Please make sure to pay attention to the cohort calendar because there are some variations in the Wednesday. It's not automatically just back and forth between A and B. We did that to balance out the amount of in-person time over the course of the school year. So there are some irregularities to it, but it's intentional. It's not mistakes. And I would remind folks, please go on our website and sync your calendar to the cohort schedules. We went and intentionally built it all in there, so you didn't have to remember it. You can sync it to your calendar and be aware every day of which cohort day as well as cycle day it is. A couple of medical reminders, and Julia will jump in if I get anything wrong, I hope. We definitely have gotten a lot of questions from parents, and we've appreciated those questions because it is parents really diligently trying to do the right thing by their children and by the school. Lots of questions about what to do if a child has a runny nose because, let's face it, it's allergy season. And the weather got cold on all of us. So you would think, you'd be surprised, but unfortunately, that's actually a very difficult question to answer. Runny noses are one of the symptoms listed on COVID-19 according to the CDC and Department of Health, which is why it's part of our screening and has to be part of our screening. But of course, we know that there are several other causes of runny noses, such as colds, fall allergies, etc. Runny noses will be more common as the weather changes. So what our doctor has advised us, our district doctor, any child with a runny nose should be kept home and symptoms monitored for the day. If it doesn't clear up right away, then folks should see their healthcare provider for additional guidance. Siblings in that situation, as long as they are asymptomatic, can attend school and should keep their distance from the symptomatic sibling while in the house. Additionally, if a child has an underlying condition that does appear consistent with COVID symptoms, again, allergies being one of the best examples, the parent should ensure that the school nurse has a letter from the doctor stating such so that we don't send the child home every single time they're exhibiting that symptom, which is easily explained by a known other condition. So medical documentation, your school nurses are very important in that. If a child does exhibit a fever at home, parents should notify the school, and in that case, see your doctor to obtain clearance before returning to school. Fever is definitely something that is of more significant concern. And typically, the guideline is any new symptoms we recommend being dealt with cautiously and by contacting your doctor. We recognize parents know their child the best, so we encourage parents to use their knowledge of your own child as well as consultation with your pediatrician to help navigate those concerns. So if in doubt, don't send them, call your doctor. That's really, I think, the best rule of thumb. I was told that the Department of Health is supposed to be putting out more guidelines about this, but I've been told that many times before, and I think I said it earlier, I think Hutchinson will be completed by the time we get that guidance, but because it's moving a whole lot faster than the Department of Health is. But if we do get additional guidance in this regard, we certainly will make parents aware of that to help clarify.
So can I just ask a question about
Yeah.
this? Because I've lived this now with, we dealt with a broken arm and now another child with a cold. So I've kept children home for a variety of reasons. And I have to say the virtual learning has been a great additive for those reasons. You don't miss a day of school unless you're really sick, I guess, these days. But we have a cold at home, and fortunately, our children won't be back until next week. But like, you know, cold symptoms can linger for a while. I don't really feel like I need to go see a doctor for cold. There's been no fever. I mean, is the expectation that when a family has a cold, you go see the doctor, or?
I'm going to turn to
Yes?
Julia.
I think in the world of COVID, we do need
Yeah.
you to call the doctor and at least do some sort of like telehealth or something,
Okay.
just so that, you know, your pediatrician knows your kids, you know your kids. So I think you should have that conversation.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And how long should a family keep their child out for something like that, or anything that lasts a while?
Pediatrician, just
Would
follow
say.
the guidance, I think.
Yeah.
That'll probably be best. And if it's been a couple of days, they may actually just say, go get a test. So,
Yeah. I ask because I know of a lot of families who have colds right now, so.
I
yeah.
know. And it's frustrating. We recognize the frustration. But at this point, better safe than sorry. And we are very thankful that we've been in this long without any
Yes.
problems.
Yeah.
So presumably they can still follow along with class activities remotely.
Yes. Yes, and I think, you know, Jessica's example is a great one. If you know that your child can't come in because of a broken arm, or they're not feeling well enough to, they have symptoms, you don't want to send them to school, but they are able to still participate from home, just call them in. And if they're participating, we'll count that as a day of attendance. Yeah. Couple other items to round out my report. I think it's two. There's been some discussion of the new COVID-19 report card. It's a dashboard that the state has put together with little warning to the schools. And it's interesting because they were supposed to be informing schools of COVID cases, but it's a dashboard for us to report back to them what cases are actually happening at the schools. So whatever that means. But each day our principals are required to submit any cases, how many students are in attendance in school, how many are in attendance at home, how many cases, students, staff, et cetera. So our principals are diligently doing that on a daily basis. We appreciate those efforts. And that really was done, I believe, by the state out of an effort to be as transparent as possible. So I bring this up because you know, there was certainly some Facebook chatter about, wait a minute, I thought there were some cases at the high school, but we don't see anything on the dashboard. So I just wanted to clarify that. Yes, as we communicated out, we did have 2 individuals test positive, but those were not showing up on the dashboard because those individuals never came to school. So the reporting system asked a specific question of how many cases do you have at school? So you ask a specific question, you get a specific answer, and their question did not contemplate the situation that we had. So if there's any, you know, it's not an absence of information being reported. Our principals are reporting daily. It's just that we have not had any cases at school. So that's a good thing in our case.
So,
But
so
folks,
can I ask you a question about that? So presumably, you know, we did one round of testing, but any cases that are discovered or reported are going to be discovered by families and reported to the Department of Health.
right.
And then they report to us.
Depending.
So how do we even know to put it on a?
And I think, Julia, if I miss any of this too, fill me in. If in that case, if a family finds out, generally we do ask them to inform us. They have to inform the Department of Health. Technically, the Department of Health doesn't need to involve us unless the contact tracing leads them to need to know, you know, if they were in a class or in a school event.
So how do we ever know?
There's a chance that we may not, unless the parent tells us, if it was outside of school.
So this doesn't.
So
really
then it
mean-
would not show up on the dashboard, and that.
So the dashboard really doesn't mean anything since it's.
It's not 100% accurate because yes, it's only what we're aware of that happens at school.
Cheryl, when somebody's absent, do they need to inform the school as to the reason for their absence?
Yes, I think parents generally do.
So
Yeah.
perhaps you'd find out that way?
Yeah. And I know, and we've specifically asked parents to notify us.
Yeah, no, that's all voluntary, which is fine. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, right now, there's a very low incidence in Westchester County, in our area.
Right.
But, you know, it's growing in other parts of the country, certainly in other parts of the world, so I'd hate to contemplate it, but it's possible that it will start to grow here too. So an accurate mechanism for knowing where we are would really be
It would be helpful.
useful.
Yeah. Julia, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I was going to say that in our reopening plans, we did talk about when we went over the plan in our presentation, I did have a flow chart where if anybody, any person of the school community tests positive, they really should be contacting their principal, who will be contacting me. So it is up to the individual, but typically, once the school year starts, they are here, the students are here, the teachers are here, so they would have to tell us, because what's going to happen is when they do test positive, DOH is notified, and when the contact tracer calls them, they'll be asking, from the day that you tested positive, or from the day that you went for testing, who have you been in contact with? And so they'll be asking for all of those individuals. Obviously, anyone can lie, but I would hope that, you know, people will be truthful, because we're talking about impacting other people's health and safety, so.
But technically, if you tested positive and didn't go to school, it
Mhm.
wouldn't be lying to
No,
say
you
you
wouldn't
were
be,
not
right.
in school.
Right.
Yeah.
So in those two student
catch-22.
cases, yeah, it was before school started, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And on the question of contact tracing, have we found the Department of Health to be very aggressive in that regard?
They're pretty responsive. I think they've been pretty good. I think they've also, I think at times get overwhelmed
I would imagine.
because they have other school districts, I'm sure, that are calling, and companies and all of that. But I do have the cell phone number of several high individuals at the Department of Health, and so they've been pretty responsive.
Nice to know people in high places.
Yes, I do know people in high places, and I have their cell phone numbers.
Great. So the final item I just wanted to share has to do with substitute teachers. And I know that we're starting to experience this as the school year gets going. Substitute teachers have been very difficult to find in normal years. I know that we've talked with PTA Council about trying to get more monitors and more substitutes in the past. Given that substitutes often are retirees or people who may not necessarily need, dependable work from day to day, there are far fewer people interested right now in subbing, given the risks associated with COVID and the idea of coming into a school environment. In addition to that, as we've all seen, districts like New York City, who's currently looking to hire about 4,500 substitute teachers, and many other districts, even in our region, are doing massive amounts of hiring to fill these vacancies caused by various leaves of absences, last-minute retirements, illness, et cetera. So we're dipping into that same pool. So this pool, which was already shallow to begin with, is now far more shallow, which is just exacerbating the problems that we would have had even in a good year. We've also, so that's kind of the day-to-day subs that we would pull in if any, if on any given day to fill a vacancy. We're down to a very, very limited number. Additionally, one thing that we've been trying to do, and Dr. Garcia has been working aggressively at this, is trying to hire permanent subs for each school building. So 2 people to be based at the building every day, guaranteed, dependable, that we could train on our technology, that would know our protocols and systems. But even that's been a challenge. As fast as we're hiring, they're also getting offered
Every time, yes.
jobs in other districts.
Yeah, the climate is difficult finding substitute teachers any year, but this is pretty outrageous how bad it is right now. But the elementary schools in particular are having a hard time finding building subs. We do have one secured at Hutchinson School, but and then also at the middle school and the high school, but we're looking for 2 at each building, and we barely have even scratched the surface.
Right.
So those positions are still open. We're still searching for them.
Yeah.
And it is our hope to find those people, but the competition is pretty fierce.
Right.
But we'll continue our search.
So if they're full-time subs, they're not really subs. If they're full-time substitute teachers, they're not really substitute teachers.
They are daily subs. They're just assigned every single day. They're not leave replacement teachers. So it's a
Right.
substitute who reports to the building every day, where we fill them in wherever the principal needs that teacher for that day, we fill them in. And then perhaps there may be another school that says, hey, I have a position, do you have that sub available? Then we switch that
Right.
sub to the other school as well.
Sounds like extra teachers to me.
Yes, that's really what it is supplemental teachers, because we know that there will be needs from day to day. They're not coming in at a teacher salary, they're coming in more at a substitute teacher salary.
That's probably the problem.
Yeah, that could be part of the problem. But it was an effort to try to prepare proactively, knowing that we were going to have this kind of shortage,
that's a
knowing
good idea.
people would be
I just
out,
think-
right, and knowing that we'd have special technology and safety protocols, that we want dependable, reliable people. So we've been trying for, I think, a better part of a month at this point, at least.
Since
to try to-
August.
Since August, to fill these positions. So we're continuing to struggle with that. And I say all that because that really is the context through which we stand, where we are right now as far as if teachers are absent. And as Steve said, this is predominantly an issue at the elementary school. So we're unfortunately in the position where if we have teachers out at this point in time, the expectation is that they post their lessons to Google Classroom so that the students, whether they're in school or at home, still have access to the learning materials. The materials would be basically done asynchronously for the kids at home, and that's largely because are not in a position to be able to do the live stream. Again, we've got day-to-day subs. It might be a situation we have to put a monitor in a classroom, a TA, an intern, somebody who may or may not be trained in the technology to just supervise the class. So it's not ideal, but that's just a logistical reality of where things are right now. So again, we just ask folks for patience and for understanding. We are very much trying to get the substitute pool that we need to adequately fill, but with everyone in the entire region pulling thousands of people out of that pool, it's been incredibly challenging. So we'll continue to work at that model, continue to improve it as we can. And certainly principals will provide as much notice as possible to parents, but again, the reality is if a teacher wakes up sick and can't come to school, we don't know until that morning. So,
And how would a family or a student find that out? Through an email from the principal, or would it be?
an email from the principal, and then the Google Classroom. I think that the teachers can send messages to the students through the classroom.
I
So,
can understand how that is logistically challenging. I totally understand why that's where we are, but it's far different, especially for an elementary parent,
Yeah.
to manage asynchronous learning versus
Exactly.
synchronous learning, and
Yeah.
they might be counting on certain hours of synchronous learning
Absolutely.
at home. So
Yeah. So that it's a really
Not
tough
ideal.
situation. I will say, if we, someone had asked a question about what if a teacher is quarantined for like 14-day period. That's somewhat of a different situation. That's actually somewhat better. If a teacher is quarantined because of potential exposure, but they're still healthy and not suffering, from COVID or any other illness, they can teach virtually from home. So that's exactly what we would set up. We would still have somebody there to supervise the class, but the teacher could actually do the full remote instruction for all students from home. So that's actually, it's odd, but that's a better situation for us than the day-to-day at this point in time. But I just wanted to put that out there again as just a challenge that we're facing. We're actively trying to resolve that, but that helps people understand the context. It's not a lack of prioritization or effort. It's just a reality of the employment climate right now. So that concludes my report for the time being.
does anybody have any questions that you touched on? Okay, so this brings us to item 4.3, which is Assistant Superintendent's update on authentic learning. Dr. Garcia.
Sure. Yes, a lot of authentic experiences going on, but I think in a better time we'll be in a different place, right? In terms of the authentic learning world, a really good update is that going back to our study of the use of space. So thanking the PEF, we do have our innovative furniture for the libraries. That's at Siwanoy, that's at Colonial, and Prospect Hill. We will celebrate when the kids were able to really be in there and really enjoy it to the full extent. But we're happy that the furniture actually arrived, and We're starting to clean it up, and at some point we'll be able to really break into that this school year. One of the biggest successes is probably the middle school library. So if you haven't been up there, I encourage the board maybe to take a walk. It's totally revamped. It's a brand new space, and again, thanks to the PF for that. We've also had a classroom at each elementary school, which has been refurbished, and then 2 at the middle school. We have a second wave coming, believe it or not, which is also going to add some more high school classrooms. So that's the exciting news. I'm very happy about that. I think the teachers are very excited about it. And like I said, we will get back to this more concentrated in terms of how it affects learning and the experiences for kids at a different time, hopefully. But again, the PF has really been gracious with that. So I will send them pictures when it looks really nice. That's a great, I think, a great opportunity for our students. In terms of the personnel world, as Dr. Champ did mention, we continue the search for certain positions, especially the substitute teachers. It is a challenge. I'm happy to say that we are recommending the appointment of a new Latin teacher. So we're able to actually find someone highly qualified. So we're excited about that. And Dr. Callahan's time in the science classrooms, chemistry and AP environmental science will come to an end next week. We're happy that we found a teacher who's currently in Valhalla, who's doing a leave replacement there, and he'll be able to join us next week. So we're very excited about that. I think the students really enjoy that classroom as well with the new teacher. So in terms of some other postings, we do have a few other positions with some maternity leaves and some other leaves, and we're dealing with that as it comes in, and also looking at certain leave requests and also dealing with that as it comes in, and evaluating it, and providing accommodations when needed. On the side instructionally, I think Dr. Champ kind of really identified all the areas which we're still focusing on. I want to thank all the teachers who've really, especially at the secondary level, they've really, I think, taken this new environment and flipped it into a great experience for our kids. I know that the elementary schools, it's a whole new experience for them as well, with the streaming and trying to interact with students at home. That's still a work in progress. I'm not surprised by that at all. If parents have any questions about the experiences in the classroom, please reach out to your teachers first so they can really understand certain thoughts that you may have, so that we can adjust along the way. I think that in terms of supporting our teachers, Beth Finkelstein in mathematics every day is offering support for our teachers in our new approaches. Kate Alex in language arts is available every day for our teachers. And also Alicia DeMastro, who is our new technology teacher at elementary school, is really giving that technology support to all our teachers, available every single day to our teachers. So I have to say confidently that there's definitely time and efforts being made to support all the teachers. And I think with a little bit more time and a little bit more, I think, study of it, things will come together a little better.
Thank you.
Sure.
4.4, Assistant Superintendent's update on the whole child. Ms. Chung.
Thank you. Good evening. As Dr. Champ mentioned earlier, I really would like to thank the parents for their cooperation in filling out the health survey. I apologize for the barrage of emails and texts every single night. I did stop, as of yesterday, the texts, because I know that I've been very disruptive to your evenings every night, but I did want to kind of help the parents set a routine with their students. The email will also be stopping by end of this week, so I just wanted to let you know that, but I did want to make sure that we had that reminder sent, because that really has helped us with the arrival process. It has really made it much quicker. The students are, for the most part, just coming in, and so it's really worked out well. I know that some of the middle and high school parents may still be having some difficulty with the app. Please feel free to email me. Many parents have. I'm your tech support, and I'll be happy to fix it for you and work with you to make it work out. So please email me directly. Some of the parents, elementary parents, have also asked if we could switch over to the easy screen, which once all of the kinks for middle and high school have worked out, we can certainly discuss that, because it does take a little bit of time, a few days, to kind of make sure that everybody's set. So we can certainly discuss that at that point. In terms of counseling, last night, our counseling department hosted a Zoom meet with Daryl Yu, Director of Admissions from Bates College, for all of our seniors and parents. Plans are underway to administer the first ACT at our high school on October 6th, which is exciting. Our counseling department has also shifted to real-time live college visits with hosting virtual college visits. And so we have over 100 colleges that have already signed up to host meetings for our students. So I think we have a lot to look forward to this fall. Thank you.
Thank you so much. 4.5, Assistant Superintendent's Update on Finance and Facilities, Mr. Ricky.
Hi, good evening, and thank you. Just to follow up on what Drs. Champ and Garcia said, great start for the school year. Facilities are in good condition. I think we're really working on resetting the buildings every night, and it's very exciting to see kids in the school and hear those happy voices. So that's it's very encouraging. Last week, as you all know, we had our COVID testing, and we had a great partnership with Westchester Medical Center and their staff. We know the first day went a little bit longer. They were really terrific as far as throttling up staff and bringing in reinforcements as needed. Over 700 students were tested. We worked through that process. I know there's going to still be some follow-up with some parents, with insurances, and we ask folks when you are communicated with to please respond to those insurances. Again, what we're doing is we will process, or Westchester Medical Center is processing the test through the parent's insurance. Whatever is not covered by insurance will be covered by the school district. If you don't submit any insurance information, that entire cost is then going to be a liability of the school district. So we ask people, again, we're not asking people to pay that bill. We won't be billed from the Westchester Medical Center. They'll bill the school district. This is all going to happen in about 30 days, or 60 days. But again, please supply that information. That'll really help us out and keep the district's bill lower for all those 700 children. So if you get that communication, you hear about it, please spread the word. People are not going to be asked to pay that bill. It's going to be processed through insurance, and the district will pick up the balance. I said that 3 times intentionally.
Jim?
Yes.
At one point, you estimated, conservatively, I think, that it could cost the district upwards of $50,000 to cover uncovered costs for this testing.
Yes.
You still feel that's about the range?
So if we don't receive all the updated insurance information, it will be higher than that. After the first day of testing, insurance compliance was at about 40%, and certainly at a much, the non-compliance was at about 40%, folks who didn't provide insurance information. I believe it got better in the next day, and the last day we only had 3 students come for testing. But again, at those numbers, it'll certainly be higher than that. The maximum cost was just under $100,000, assuming if nobody had any insurance. But at this point, it would be north of that $50,000 number with what we're looking at, probably in the $60,000 to $70,000 range.
So that's 700 is roughly a quarter of our student population.
Right. And again, this was only testing for only of our high school students.
Right.
You're
About
right.
a quarter of the student population.
Exactly.
So I'm belaboring this point because it's important. It's costing us money to do this, and if we would want to encourage the parents to do, to put it through their insurance.
Thank you. That's exactly it. And this gives me a great opportunity to say it a 4th time. We're not going to be sending parents a bill. We want to process it through your insurance, and whatever is not covered, the district will then pick up that cost.
So extrapolating, if we ever got in a position where we needed to test everybody, 70,000 times 4 is $280,000, $300,000 to do that.
Exactly, and that's $280,000 we don't then have towards educational purposes.
Well, we haven't budgeted.
Right. Yes. So thank you. In addition to that, so we got the COVID. Just following up with the board, about a month and a half ago, I know the board requested that KG&D architects and OLA consulting engineers perform a review and an assessment of the district-wide ventilation systems. We shared those results, and the architect, using the feedback from OLA, assessed our systems to be in good working condition. Again, this meets the standards for which the buildings, as constructed, were built. So some of our buildings are older, much older, 1920s and 30s. But we can say confidently that all of our ventilation works. You can feel a difference in the building. Some of the ventilation, as we know, in the 70s, we stopped a lot of ventilation, and sometimes it's loud and disruptive in classrooms, and it had been turned off over the years, and different dampers closed. All of those items have been addressed, and this was a really great opportunity for us, really, to get everything back in that solid working order. And we see our staff; they're opening their windows, and we're getting fresh air and good ventilation throughout the buildings.
Yeah, and I can second that. You can actually feel the air movement pretty much all the time, especially in the elementary schools. It's actively turning over fresh air, which is great. That's exactly what we wanted.
Not to belabor money, but that probably cost us something to do that.
That assessment, well, the assessment was about $20,000 from KGD. And then, of course, as we saw some items that were not working as expected, we fixed them. And those were not large dollar items, but certainly they had a big impact on the school. Just a funny story, we were going through Siwanor School. One of the bathroom fans wasn't working. They didn't even know there was a bathroom fan. 10 or 15 years ago, it had been shut off because a neighbor across the street complained it was too loud at night. As the head custodian remembered, oh wait, that person's now moved, we could turn the fan back on. So again, it's different things and different reasons why some of the ventilation wasn't turned on in different places. Good opportunity though, again, for everybody to do it top to bottom, look through their building and get all that air moving. So
Point is, we are spending money
oh yeah,
to fix these problems.
absolutely.
Jim, was the bulk of that repair work was done internally, though? Is that correct?
Absolutely, we've
Yeah.
got it. We've got an in-house HVAC maintenance mechanic, and as we saw items, some things was simple tune-up, change contacts, change a belt. In other instances, we changed motors, but we got everything up and running. And I think everybody has a much better assessment of all of the ventilation. And as you saw, there was a unit-by-unit assessment provided by OLA, which we shared with the board and with our union district leaders, too. So all that information has been provided and is out there now.
That's great.
In this evening's meeting, you'll see we have, actually, let me go through my letter, a little bit more my letter. The capital construction is moving along very nicely. Hutchinson School is just really flying. Looks like they're going to be pouring the concrete slab on the main floor within the next week, which is really terrific. They're starting to frame out the roof. The masons are finishing up with the block wall, and they really want to get started on the brick. I shared with the board that there was a mock-up that was completed of the brick, and it's good that we do mock-ups because when the architects came and looked at the mock-ups, it wasn't what was in the design. So that's being straightened out right now, and we expect the masons to be back tomorrow, and Friday. And we'd ask the members of the bond steering committee to see if they can find some time to look at that mock-up either later this week or early next week. To see what that final mock-up's going to look like. But the masons are really looking to push forward and get moving. The windows are pretty much are ready to go into. We were there yesterday. There's about 60 or 70 people. It's a lot of movement, and they're really moving forward. It's very encouraging to see. And we're working on putting together a bond steering committee meeting. We're looking at October 8th right now if we can. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to talk about what's happening at Hutchinson, some of the change orders that we deferred on earlier on, such as the kitchen equipment, some of the paving, and some of those deferred items. Now that we have a better idea of where we are on this particular project as we come out of the ground, and we'll have that more information for that at the October 8th meeting, and then with recommendations to the board following that.
And also strategies for bidding prospect.
That's exactly what we're going to discuss that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about our other work here. So the annex roof work is finishing up right now. They're working after school hours because we're not letting them work during school hours. But they're really at the tail end, and we expect that project to be completed by the end of this month. The masonry work finished up last week. We know that there's going to be some attention that will be needed on the front of the school, and we're hoping to have some more information for that October 8th meeting so that we could put out specifications for that repair work to come back at the same time as Prospect Hill. So we have all the information when we award final bids for Prospect Hill. At the Glover Complex, we're waiting the regulatory clearances for the drainage pipe that has to be repaired. And then once that's done, we can let the bids go for that and the batting cages. Some of the turf by the mound showed some early wear. We worked with the installer, and we're also working with Town Recreation to make sure everybody's doing exactly what they need to be doing so that it lasts more than 2 months of the summer for the pitching mound anyway, for our kids. And that's going to be in tip-top condition for the beginning of the school year, or excuse me, for the beginning of the baseball season for our students when, provided they do get to play a season in the spring. And I think if it's outdoor sport, I think it sounds like it's had a pretty good chance. Hutchinson School, we got the change order, we've got the annex roof. And then lastly, state aid. So the state started holding back 20% of our state aid, and then this week, or late last week, they said, no, we're not going to hold back 20% of your September aid, but we're making no promises moving forward. So we're kind of, as Dr. Champ mentioned, we hear one thing, we feel another thing, and we're getting mixed messages from the state. I think if we're to play it cautiously, we could probably still expect a 20% reduction in our state aid this year. And I think some of it is going to have a determination on what happens in November. So we're really just waiting to see. But as a group and through my trade organization, we're all still planning on that 20% reduction, unfortunately. On this evening's meeting, you'll see there's a large item for BOCES for the board to approve. This is the services that we receive from BOCES. It includes the Lyric, which is that's all of our technology, and other shared services that we receive from BOCES as being part of BOCES members, Ed, any software, and there's a detailed listing in the meeting notes. And then our committees are meeting. We have an audit committee meeting this Friday morning. We'll talk about the year-end financial results. We will then bring those recommendations, and at the next board meeting, our external auditors will present the findings to the board. Our safety committee met, and then we had a subcommittee. We're working on planning our lockdown drills for the year throughout all of our schools, and those making sure that our lockdown and evacuation drills are all balanced between Cohort A and Cohort B, and also that they're going to be announced. So we want to lower that anxiety level, but make sure we practice those drills as best we can. Lastly, and this is the last one, I just remind folks and the public and tell everyone in the cafeterias it's still open feeding for lunch and for breakfast every day. That means students can come and get a regular cafeteria lunch. There's no charge to them. This is part of the CARES legislation, and this is going to be in effect until the funding remains available at the federal government, till it runs out, or December 31st. So, as expected, we saw great participation with the sixth graders and the young middle school students. And again, we want to encourage people. It's easy. You can with the grab and go, you can get through that line a lot faster. And we've got outdoor, as you all know, we've got a lot of outdoor seating available in addition to the socially distanced indoor cafeteria space. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next is Section 5, Financial Reports and Motions. I'm going to take the first three all on their own. This pertains to our goals, our communication protocols, and our committees. So item 5.1, motion to adopt the 2020-2021 Superintendent Board of Education goals. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Sue. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Eileen. So let's take one more look at this. These were the board goals that we discussed at our last meeting.
Yeah, and I would basically most of the language is same as last year for goals 1, 3, 4, and 5. 2 I drafted based on our conversation from last time. So just wanted to take a look at that and see if the board had any suggestions or tweaks to language, or if you were comfortable with it as drafted.
Yeah, I think it captures the spirit of what we talked about last time. So incorporating the strategic plan goals into the first goal, and then making sure that we're calling out the special circumstances, probably
Yes.
is the best way to put it, that we're in this year. So I think it looks great.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else?
Anything else?
For me.
And certainly item 3 takes on a new meaning this year, I think. You know,
Yeah.
obviously, managing a responsible budget is always of a great importance to the board, but this year, the budget, in terms of planning next year, we'll have even more uncertainty than in years past.
Well,
So,
and I think that's exactly the challenge. We've been tasked with adding, each meeting you hear about things that we're adding, whether it's substitute teachers, testing, all the PPE, all the different provisions that we're making so a lot has been added that was unbudgeted for this year, and then at the same time, you're hearing about aid drawdowns. So that is definitely going to present some challenging budget for the next couple of years, most likely. So, that goal will be all the more important this year.
anybody else? And also just one more thought that pops to mind. I'm glad that we've consolidated our strategic plan this year into the first bullet point, but and I know the priority has been to get school up and running, which is no small feat, as we all know, but last year we had so many updates on the strategic plan, and I know that maybe we will take smaller bites along the way, given what we're up against, but it would be, as we get pertinent updates from our assistant superintendents throughout the year, and we settle into our rhythm, I'd love to continue to hear updates where they apply.
Yeah.
I can certainly see that there's lots of, as Dr. Garcia said, lots of authentic learning going on in a way
Yes.
that we never expected when this became a part of our strategic plan. But
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I actually think the committees are going to feed right into exactly that, keeping those different topics alive, because whether it's authentic learning, wellness, or one suggestion I was going to bring up when we get to the committees to oversee COVID work, I think it's embedded naturally in. The committees are going to be driving the work that we do, as well as the administrative goals for the year. And with the administrative team, what I had the direction I had given them was really to keep it simple, just to be relentlessly focused on two things this year. Yes, we have to do all these, but really to distilled it down to surviving the uncertainties of this year and taking care of the physical and emotional safety and health and well-being of everyone. So that's really what our focus is going to be, and that naturally draws in all three areas of the strategic plan in and of itself.
definitely. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay, do I have a motion to adopt the 2020-2021 Board of Education Communication Protocols?
So moved.
So moved. Or
Thanks.
second.
Who was the first?
I think John.
Thanks, John and Sue. Okay, so this, as we mentioned last week, last time, where we didn't make any major tweaks to, this just references our communication protocols, how we manage sort of our discussion amongst the board, with our superintendents, with building principals, at our meetings, communication protocols related to public comment, and that sort of thing. The media. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and 5.3, motion to adopt the 2020-2021 Board of Education Committee roles and responsibilities. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Eileen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Vinny. Okay, so let's open these up as well. On the wrong tab here. So this speaks to our, both our district and our board committees.
Yes.
Kept them very consistent for the most part with last year,
Yeah,
right?
basically we can maintain the same membership going forward, and basically the same committees as well at the board level. Most of these we do solicit for community participation, so pending tonight's approval, we'll be putting out an email soliciting membership for the coming year. One suggestion that I was going to offer to the board, I know that there has been, well, I guess two pieces. Because of that relentless focus that we need to take this year on the focus of the year, we are going to be putting some committees, some of the internal committees, they're more district level committees, not board committees, putting them on pause for the year, just so we can really focus our efforts where they need to be. And we'll be, of course, maintaining the work that those committees were overseeing, but just trying to put our time and energy at which is most important. One thing I wanted to bring up, I know that there has been, through the planning process, We did a lot of planning through the summer as far as for reopening of school with administrators and teachers. But then we tapped into our standing committees to get some parent feedback and to vet the ideas, as sounding boards, to get feedback before things were finalized. And we found that to be a pretty productive approach. So one of the, and I know that there's been a, discussion on Facebook about, we do monitor Facebook too, that's kind of fun. But desire to continue to have opportunities for parents to weigh in as we're implementing plans. So one suggestion I was going to offer is to potentially tap and maybe expand for the purpose of tapping the Advocacy and Community Engagement Committee as one committee whose mission might actually fit pretty well with ongoing engagement about specifically the learning program. That was just one thought I wanted to toss out to the board and see what your thoughts were on expanding that to have greater involvement in using those a little differently this year.
Having chaired that for the last couple years, I think that would be a great idea. The composition of that committee is normally at least a member from each of our schools to give us like a broad representation of some feedback, from across the district on various topics, and to call to action advocacy issues at the state level and, disseminate that information to our individual schools. Oftentimes there is sort of a part of those meetings that is dedicated to something that's happening more locally, and I could see this year having a chunk of each of the meetings be some update specifically on what's going on and gathering feedback on how things are going with regards to the pandemic in our schools. And if we made that a focus, though, I would imagine that we might want to have a few more committee members, maybe 2 or so from each school versus 1, just to get a broader representation of parent feedback. So I don't know how others feel about that.
I think that group plus the input of the PTA council on a regular basis, gives
Yes.
us a pretty broad representation across the school districts.
Yeah.
I think that sounds like a good idea too, adding some people to that committee, but then keeping that diversity from the different schools. I think something we haven't talked about yet either is the opportunity to do surveys and getting feedback from parents that way. I think we should continue to do that so that the whole community can feel like they're being heard, but I do think that having people on this committee to help with this discussion would also be great.
Yeah, and that's actually something, I'm glad you brought that up. We had in our minds to survey once we've kind of been at it about 3 to 4 weeks. So we're already at, week 2 at this point. So what we'd like to plan to do is in the probably next week or so to put together a staff survey as well as a parent survey. We wanted to give enough time that things really got up and running and people got comfortable before, because any change is difficult. And,
Of course.
Nothing works well at first. So we wanted to make sure that we gave it enough time to genuinely start to work things out and people to get into a routine. But we definitely want to solicit that feedback. So I know the administrators would look at that, but that is something, those surveys could be shared with the committees as well.
Are those surveys designed in-house?
Generally, we do, yes. I think an important thing with these particular surveys will also have it disaggregated by grade level, because I think definitely the K2 experience versus the 3rd through 5th grade experience are different. Middle school different, high school different.
Yeah.
So,
Do you imagine doing thought exchange, or would it be more of a Google survey? Because I know we use thought exchange in the spring for this.
given that we're probably looking for more specific feedback, our initial thinking was to do it more of a survey monkey instead of the broad open-ended. But to really ask some specific questions
For
that can be a little
consistency.
bit more actionable. Yeah.
I want to just also say that this past year, that community engagement committee, another benefit, and maybe this was intended to be a benefit all along, but it was the first time I really experienced it, was that because we had so many people from the different schools, they were really able to kind of provide color around some of the stuff that was going on, and they were more in the loop, and we were able to communicate more effectively, broadly, online, all of that. So I think just adding to that and having the COVID details are the things that are going to be most easily misunderstood and cause havoc. So I think that that's a great use of people.
I think I would change the emphasis. I was on that committee 2 years ago, and it was sort of equal advocacy, equal engagement. I think you're really talking about engagement here with a smattering of advocacy.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
There's
that
a
wasn't
lot
the
to
case
talk
last
about.
year.
yes.
Yeah.
Last year was pretty 50-50,
Yeah.
and the group met way more frequently, I think, than we had planned, just given
Yeah.
the budgeting was so, even before the pandemic was
I
so
know,
stressful,
yeah.
and then this hit, so, and I'm imagining that the advocacy at the state level, well, maybe we have to prioritize like
federal.
what's happening like right in front of our noses versus more at a distance. I think it's also going to be a pretty active advocacy year, but yeah, I mean, in terms of our like meetings, probably I would imagine more of it would be community engagement
It's
in
a
our
big-
meetings, you know.
It is a lot to cover.
Yeah. But the committee members wrote some letters for advocacy,
yeah.
and I mean, they were super
A
involved.
very active
Yeah.
committee, yeah.
Okay.
And similarly, I could see wellness and authentic learning kind of having more regular updates as, you know, those topics pertain to the pandemic and where we are with our schools. In particular, with wellness, it's mental health, mental and emotional, as well as physical health. And so there's always been sort of that shared component to the direction, and it might be an interesting year too. And we've always had social workers and psychologists who like to join that committee, or people with that kind of background, but to have like a nurse or a doctor who in the community who might be interested on that front.
Definitely.
There's no, I think it's probably just a blank to be filled in, but there's nothing filled in under community members, is that,
Yeah, that's purposely blank for now.
okay.
So we use this as a shared doc internally. So once we approve the committees tonight, then we'll solicit for community membership,
Okay.
then we'll fill that in.
I believe Alex is ready to send something soon
Yes.
once we finalize this. And so, as I said earlier, October 8th would be when the applications are due.
I would hope we'd get, the same good participation we had in the bond steering committee.
Yeah. The difference being that our meetings will be held virtually because we're trying to limit the
Yeah,
number of
that makes
people
a
in the
big
building,
difference.
which may make it easier for people to commit the time.
Yeah.
So,
I think it will.
any other questions or comments?
I think
On- oh,
one, sorry,
yeah.
I have one other comment. I think about the advocacy committee is something we talked about. Might consider that, we list the number of meetings that are expected so that as people are applying, they understand what the commitment is. I think if this advocacy committee, engagement committee is taking on some of these COVID things, there is potential that they could meet more than 4 times in the
That's
school
true.
year.
That's a good point.
So it's just something that, it helps the most if we get people coming to the meetings regularly. So I think that's just making sure that people that volunteer are able to show up. It would be great.
Okay. That's a good suggestion. When we put out the notification, we can increase it to maybe to 6,
Or up
approximately
to a
6.
certain number, yeah.
Yeah.
Something like
Probably
that.
like,
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I guess those are suggested number of meetings too. So we can,
I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot more, but sometimes, I don't know.
We definitely met more than 4 times, though.
Oh, yeah,
Last
I
year was
think
an
we did.
unusual year, so.
Yeah.
And we list the hours and times, right? So people know if
Yeah,
it's
sort
a
of
evening
approximate.
or,
yeah, approximate idea of the time frame.
okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I'd like to take a consent of items 5.4 through 5.6. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thanks, Jess and Sue. Any questions or comments? This is what Mr. Ricky referenced in his opening remarks. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I'd like to take a consent of 5.7 and 5.8. Do I have a motion?
So
Thanks,
moved.
Sue and John. So these are the some sidebar agreements with the Teachers Association. One of them pertains to the video cameras. so
Yeah,
is that a
I wanted to just speak quickly to both, and I think Dr. Garcia mentioned the first. One has to do with Dr. Callahan having stepped in to teach in addition to his Director of Math and Science responsibilities, so we want to make sure that we recognize him appropriately. The other has to do with use of the webcams in the classrooms. So that is something that, that needed to have just a side agreement guiding that. One item that I think is probably worthy of note in there, the teachers are using, we've got a great tech department, a small but mighty tech department, and they had all the webcams installed before school started. They are our on-site hands and help whenever we have problems, so they've been doing a great job internally. So I know it does make reference in there to teachers not being responsible for the webcams, and that's really a technical, because they don't have the technical expertise. So internally, when teachers have problems, they reach out to our tech department, and they're the Johnny on the spot there to fix and to help repair. If parents have problems, it's not in this letter, but I figure it's just worth mentioning. There is a parent and student helpline that we contract for with BOCES for, and there should be a link to that on our website. If Alex Wolf was here tonight, he would tell us exactly where it is, but I believe it's on the digital resources page on the website. So just wanted to point that out in case parents are having problems at home with technology, just because it's somewhat related. And if, worst case, if you need help and can't get a hold of a help desk at home, please always reach out to your principals. They're there to help. I know folks often don't want to go to the principal, don't want to bother them with little things, but that's what they're there for. They want to be there. They want to help resolve things as quickly as possible.
So if this system went down mid-class, though, you would call the helpline or you'd call the building principal?
If
or?
the whole,
I mean, I tend to reach out to a parent in the class and be like, is it just us? And
well,
then,
yeah, and I guess that's
but
the
if
hard
you
thing to
realize
figure
it's
out.
more pervasive, what do you do?
Yeah, if you think it's a big problem, definitely reach out to the principal immediately.
Okay.
Because
Maybe call the main
they
office
can
or
get the
something.
tech department right away and get things, get them on it, get
Okay.
it resolved.
Any questions or comments?
I had a question, Jess. So, Dr. Champ, this agreement talks about where the cameras are facing. Could you speak to that a little bit? Because I think some parents had questions about why the camera was facing towards the smart board, and that is explained in the agreement.
Sure. Yeah, the thinking behind that was trying to protect student privacy because, there could be issues, there could be any number of issues that go on in a classroom. There could be students whose parents don't want them, on video. That's one piece. There could be a student with an IEP that somebody may visibly see an accommodation being provided, so it might be something that could be more telling about a student's academic, disability than should be. A child could be having a tough emotional time, and the teacher could be trying to deal with that, and certainly you would not want, to exacerbate a situation. So it really is rooted predominantly in student privacy. But there are times where students may be on the camera too, as teachers do try to make that experience as interactive as possible. If they're doing morning meeting, or if they're doing other things, they may turn the camera towards the students if they, if they feel it's appropriate. But to the idea of it being aimed basically forward on the teacher and on the presentation was rooted in student privacy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, do I have a motion for 5.9, accept a donation? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Leah.
Second.
Thanks, Eileen. Okay. So this is, be it resolved that the Pelham Union Free School District does accept the monetary donation of $6,000 for grant 2102, Facing History and Ourselves, to partially fund a professional development program for ESL and social studies teachers at the secondary level, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, the Pelham Education Foundation. The generous donations keep coming.
Yeah, and I just want to really express my appreciation for this. Many of you have heard, I know a lot of parents were looking into facing history in ourselves from a parent perspective. We've actively, Maria Thompson has been working to bring professional development in throughout the summer, started back in the spring as well. So we're continuing to increase our partnership there, and just appreciate the PEF support of that ongoing work.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 6 is Superintendent's Personnel Recommendations. I'd like to take a consent of 6.1 through 6.4. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Vinny.
Second.
Thanks, Jess. Anything to add?
Just the appointment of some teachers that we have been actively pursuing, just like in science and PE, actually at the elementary level, but also a new Latin teacher.
Thank you.
And on the other side, we have a rescission of 2 appointments. Again, circumstances of a tight labor market out there. We are appointing 1 additional monitor, granting a leave of absence, and appointing a part-time availability worker. We would encourage people, though, we're still open for positions for lunch monitors. So for a college student who needs to stretch their legs one day, it's a great hour and a half in the middle of the day, $19 an hour. Tell a friend.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 7, People Personnel Services, we have Schedule D. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks, Eileen. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 8 is New Business.
Yeah, I have some new business. So back on September 15th, which was early days of schools starting up, I sat in on a roundtable for Board of Ed presidents regarding how things had been going. So there were a number of districts who kind of chimed in with answers to particular questions, and everybody answered the same questions about, you know, the startup and what their plans were and how the community was responding, et cetera, et cetera. So I can just tell you sort of broadly that among the districts that participated, there was no magic bullet. Nobody had everything right, according to them, and the approaches were pretty broad, especially with respect to learning and to scheduling. Everyone is either currently hybrid or currently virtual, expecting to become hybrid at some point. No one has everybody in school. A few districts said that they switched to block scheduling in their high schools, but the ones who said that also said it was very hard on the community because it was a big shift and it was a lot of anxiety at a time when there was already a lot. What else? Some districts had more in-person learning than we do, and some had less in-person than we do. One district is actually has Cohort A coming on one day and Cohort B the next, and they're repeating the lessons. So they have no ability to have synchronous learning, and apparently very little at-home learning. So that's something that we have overcome. And all the districts seem to be following the sports guidelines, but several are holding off on clubs completely. Some are having them meet just virtually, and then a few districts were saying they were having like 1 week virtually and 1 week in person, but I didn't really understand how they were making that happen. But everybody pretty much said that it's been tough going with the communities, that the communication is hard and everybody's feeling pain and anxiety. And most school districts also said that they were planning for a really soothing board retreat.
Retreat in its true meaning for once.
Exactly. So
Sounds nice.
that was that. It was fascinating to hear what everybody was saying, and also very comforting to know that nobody had really figured it out and gotten it all right.
Thanks for attending that for me. This is something that the board president set up in the spring in the region because of what was going on, and so I've been tuning in regularly. I actually think it's interesting for other board members to hear some perspective, and there's been topics like back in the spring related to how everybody was dealing with graduations, because I think it's really easy for us to all be spinning on these ideas. I know, Dr. Champ, you're constantly in contact with superintendents and all of the assistant superintendents with their colleagues. We're receiving feedback from you, but I think it's really easy to think about all these issues very myopically and it's important to step outside of Pelham and realize that we're all facing these same issues, and sometimes there's learned lessons from other districts. So, thank you. Section 9 is communications and comments from the public. I did receive some this evening, which I will read. Just want to make sure I don't miss any. Okay, this one comes from Katie Krasner and Brian Hughes at 450 Esplanade. Good evening. We know that you've heard from many parents, but would be remiss not to be part of this conversation. This is a situation that cannot get better in its present state. It isn't about giving it a chance, because even with time, this won't get better. The Pelham virtual learning experience is very poor at best, hard to hear, can't see the smart board, ridiculous for anyone in grades K1 or 2. But the fact that it is a one-way experience for children at home is absurd. It is extremely frustrating to any child and may not be the right way to learn. Maybe the BOE and superintendent are forgetting how badly March through June went, so to continue along an ineffective path and allow children to lose even more time is disappointing. The issue yesterday at Siwanoy regarding remote children not having class when a teacher is absent is also unacceptable. The reason given, teacher privacy primarily, makes no sense, and technology-wise, there are many ways to circumvent that. Most obviously, having the principal of the school administer the password for the absent teacher's teaching plan and notes. We are not in a position to send 2 children to private school, nor should we be forced to make that choice. As it is, we're spending a lot of money weekly to have someone help during remote days because it's not possible for young children to do it on their own, and we work. All businesses pivot when it's apparent a product or idea isn't working. Great businesses pivot quickly to minimize damage. We want to have faith that our district can and will do better. Okay. This is from Tanya and George Baptista at 538 Manor Ridge Road. It is completely unreasonable and absurd to expect elementary school students, especially in the younger grades, to learn through 5+ hours of non-interactive live streaming. Our children and many other students are struggling to follow along and stay engaged all day long. They don't even have the opportunity to ask questions or let their teacher know when the stream is down or if they didn't understand an assignment. Students cannot be expected to keep paying attention under these circumstances and just save their questions for the afternoon call, which could be hours later. Live streaming does not work, and we are very surprised and disappointed that the BOE and Dr. Champ did not have the foresight to recognize this from the beginning. That being said, there is clearly no technology limitation, so we urge the administration to recognize their mistake and immediately start offering virtual students and cohorts interactive classes and more regular teaching engagement through Google Meet or any similar technology like students in hundreds of other school districts nationwide and the majority of Westchester County school districts. This is from Anna Raff, 437 2nd Avenue. Dear Board of Education, first I'd like to take a second to thank the board, school administration, and staff for getting the school year off the ground. My middle and high schooler are thriving with the mix of in-person and virtual instruction. Going to school in person definitely makes a difference. Second, I'd like to know why Julianne's playground remains closed to the public. It's my understanding that Prospect Hills structures are available for public use during the off hours. Is there a consistent district-wide policy? If so, please explain it or let me know where I can read it. As you know, the playground and adjoining blacktop is such an important outdoor asset to the entire community, especially those who live in proximity to it. Given the emphasis on outdoor play during the COVID-19 pandemic, many parents, such as myself, find ourselves driving our smaller children to playgrounds in New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, and elsewhere in Westchester County. From a public health perspective, this is far from ideal, but necessary given the options in Pelham that are now very limited with Julianne's playground being closed. And finally, from Michelle Acosta. First, I'd like to commend the teachers for doing an amazing job in an impossible situation. Second, I would like to strongly suggest the district amend its policy regarding the lack of interaction with virtual learners outside of the school day. Even a brief 5-minute period during snack or prior to lunch would be a significant improvement. Third, I would like to strenuously recommend the district amend the policy regarding no virtual learning on days when teachers have substitutes. There must be other arrangements made to enable students to have school on these days. Thank you. And as always, this question was posed to me after public comment last time. Normally we would have members, under usual circumstances, members of the public coming into the podium. We don't engage with the back and forth Q&A, but at some point we circle back, whether it be Dr. Champ or myself, with some response to your questions or your comments in the coming days. Okay, so section 10, adjournment of the meeting.
Madam President, would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
I would, so moved. Do I have a second? I was going to say everybody wants to stay. Thanks, John. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Have a good night.